Welcome back to the War Group of Woe. In today's video, we're going to be doing an end-of-year army tier list. As tier lists go, this is my opinion as well as what I have seen in the community anecdotally and what I have been collecting data in tournaments in my general area and just all around. This tier list is to kind of give you a general idea of where an army will fall in comparison to all of the others, but as with anything of this nature, if you are really, really good, you can bring some of the lower armies up a tier or two, or if you are just starting the game and you don't really have a full grasp of your rules, some of the higher tier armies might be brought down a peg or two. Nothing wrong with that. That's just kind of the nature of playing a game like this. Without further ado, let's get started. Starting things off in Tier 5, we fortunately and kind of unfortunately only have one army down here at the very, very bottom, and that's the Gloomspite Gits. The poor Gloomspite Gits have been struggling for a long, long time, but with inklings of their new battle tome around the corner, there is hope for our green gobbo boys. I personally am really excited for the new Gloomspite Gits Codex. I think their army is super fun and always a joy to see. I'm a big Squig guy, so I hope that their new book really gives them the breath of life that they need. Moving into Tier 4, again, we don't have too many, both thankfully and a little bit sadly. We are going to start with Flesh Eater Courts. Flesh Eater Courts are kind of having a hard time because they go by the mantra of lots of low rend attacks. And with 3rd edition and save stacking, you kind of need a little bit of rend to really chew through a lot of stuff. This is no means that they are bad. It just kind of means that they might struggle against higher save opponents. Still, a very fun faction, nonetheless. Moving up from the previous tier lists, the Blades of Khorne. They are still not the best. They can struggle a whole lot with certain army compositions, but I have been seeing a whole lot of placements and higher skill players doing a lot of good things with Blades of Khorne. This is mostly just relying on the raw output of the greater demons. So that's your bloodthirsters, mostly the bloodthirster of rage, because it's very, very cheap. And so just getting a whole bunch of big monsters in there and ripping and tearing is how you're going to succeed with Blades of Khorne. I haven't seen or heard anything that would indicate that Blades of Khorne are getting a new book anytime soon, which is a little unfortunate. So they will most likely sit here in Tier 4 for the foreseeable future. Moving on to Tier 3, which I would say is the sweet spot for the tiers. This is kind of where we want most armies to be, not too underpowered and not too overpowered. We are going to start off with Fire Slayers. Nothing much has changed with the Fire Slayers. They are just kind of hanging out. Their book that came out earlier this year, it really didn't give them that much of a power boost, mostly just kind of cleaned some things up and rewrit a bunch of stuff. So they're going to sit here in Tier 3. Now for Heated Knights of Slaanesh. This might be a contentious placing, as quite a few people would say they belong in Tier 4 or maybe even Tier 5, but I really believe in Heated Knights. I think that they can do some serious good stuff with the right build. So I think that they are in Tier 3, but not solidly. I would say they are kind of on the cusp between Tier 4 and Tier 3, but I'm erring on the side of optimism and saying that they are on Tier 3. Really, their main builds revolve around poking down and harassment with Bliss Barbs and just kind of playing that skirmish style game. Now we have the good old OBR. They, they're kind of in a similar position as Heated Knights as the season of Galatian Veterans has rolled on and 3rd edition not being so kind to them. I think that they could be on the edge of Tier 3 towards the lower end. This is mostly just because they don't get access to a lot of the really powerful universal rules that come with 3rd edition just because they have their relentless discipline points and sometimes they can be a bit finicky. But with some recent buffs with Battle Line Necropolis Stalkers and some points drops, I think that they could be positioned in tier 3 solidly. They are an absolutely amazing faction to play. I have an OBR army of myself, and it is one of my more favorite ones to play besides my Sylvaneth, obviously. OBR has a very unique gameplay, and they legitimately play like no other army. So definitely a bonus for them. Caradron Overlords. Now this is a really odd placing. Caradron Overlords at the start of 3rd edition were they were coming into it as one of the top armies, and then they immediately got knocked down to middle tier, just kind of with the shifting meta. But I think that these guys are a sleeper pick now. I've been seeing a lot of rumblings of some really, really powerful Caradron Overlords lists and kind of some coming up from the underground of the middle tiers. You could argue that Caradron could be placed in tier 2, low tier 2, high tier 3. I haven't seen them all that much, and I haven't played against them very much, so I can't say with confidence if I think that they should be in tier 2. So I'm erring on the side of caution with these ones and putting them in tier 3. Good old Stormcast plus a little bit of Cities. I'm sorry, Cities of Sigmar. Cities of Sigmar is a little bit of a curious one. They are solidly in tier 3 because of their just intense diversity. They have so many different models to pick from, and with the rumors and confirmation of a huge range refresh and a new book in sometime in the new year, I think we are going to see cities shoot up a tier or two. But for right now, they are pretty much just Stormcast auxiliaries at this point. Now Skaven. Skaven, I think, are right where they should be in that they feel very lore friendly, and the way they play and then the way they interact is very Skaven-y. You still have to worry about blowing yourself up, but with their 3rd edition book, it's reined in a lot of the low points of Skaven. You're no longer just losing half your army to self-damage. And the cleaning up of their battle line rules has made them a lot more accessible. I think Skaven are a solid tier 3. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, and that is very literally and metaphorically true with Sons of Behemoth. For the start of the start of 3rd edition, they were the kings as they were exclusively monsters, and the start of 3rd edition was incentivizing monsters. Well, now with new armies coming up and kind of taking their place, as well as the lack of incentive for monsters, they are now tier 3. I think they're still fine, and they have shown to be very powerful, but there's just better options. You could put these guys in tier 2 and it would still make sense. It's mostly just kind of matchup dependent. Before we move on to the latter half of the tier list, I'd like to give thanks to my Patreon supporters. You guys are fantastic, and an extra special thanks to Nick Hoff. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there's a link in the description below, as well as a link to the Discord channel. I'll like to see you there. Moving on into tier 2, this one was a bit of a weird tier for me to make. I kind of shifted some things around a whole bunch, but finally settled on this. Now, to start, we have Ideneth Deepkin. My previous tier list, I had Ideneth up at tier 1, and I still think that they are really powerful, but I think that tier 1 has started to crowd them out, in that there's just a lot of really high-end stuff up there that sometimes Ideneth just might not have the durability to weather. They're still very powerful. They are very much a glass cannon. They are going to be quick and kind of dance around you until turn 3 and try and execute you there. So if that sounds like fun, try and pick them up. Now we have Ogre Mawtribes, one of the newer books and one that I think is very well written in terms of going from the 2nd edition book to the 3rd edition book. They didn't change too much, mostly just a lot of internal balancing. It's no longer Beastclaw Raiders and then some Gluttons. It's now you have 2 fully fleshed out sides of the book. And with the threat of Kragnost giving all of the ogres 3d6 charge, which can then do damage, I think ogres are solidly tier 2. Soulblight Gravelords. Spooky, scary vampires, skeletons, and zombies. Your classic gothic horror tropes. These guys are super fun. They have a lot of varied playstyles, and I think are a good pick for tier 2. Moving on to Night Hunt, one of the best glow ups, I think, from second edition book to third edition book. They have really shown to be a upper middle tier army, and I think that's fantastic. They have such a fun model range, something I've definitely considered picking up a few ghosts here and there. So I'm happy to see them at tier 2. Lastly, for tier 2, this might be another contentious pick. We have Disciples of Tzeentch. Towards the end of the second edition book's lifespan, the Disciples of Tzeentch were, for a time, one of the most powerful books in the game, but due to successive nerfs, mostly targeted towards Legion of the First Prince, RIP, they were pushed down to tier 3. But now with their new book, I think they are high tier 2, most likely tier 1. I haven't played a whole bunch against the New Disciples book, or have I seen a whole bunch of reports on the new book. Just kind of from what I've been reading, the new book is very, very powerful. We just kind of need to see what it does as more tournaments take place and we see a few more data points. Now we have the cream of the crop, the very top tier 1. To start us off, we have Sylvaneth. Now, you may consider my opinion on Sylvaneth biased, but I think that even coming from me or just anyone, Sylvaneth are very, very powerful. They have a lot of tools, and if they don't want you to be near them, you are not going to get near them. They, I think, have the most mobility in the game, just through their wildwoods, their speed, their teleport shenanigans, all of it. They are the most mobile faction, period. And with some very strong lists and uh, some insect lists, Durthu bomb lists, Alarial lists, you just have so much variety and all of the lists are good. There's a few small internal balance issues, mostly with dryads. They want to be durable, but they kind of struggle with it. Regardless, Sylvaneth are tier 1 army. Moving on to Daughters of Cain. Previously, I had them in tier 2, but with a lot of data points suggesting that they are a lot stronger than I give them credit for, as well as just kind of playing them more myself, I think that Daughters of Cain are really powerful and can be quite oppressive with a tournament optimized list. Most of what you see is kind of the classic Marathi plus bow snakes, but with the third edition book, there's a few more builds floating around with witch elves and the gladiator lady that came out with the Arena of Shades. I forget her actual model's name, but you know what I'm talking about. Overall, a solid tier 1. Lumineth Realm Lords. Now this is one that I considered putting in tier 2 as the new book really didn't increase their power all that much. It mostly just cleaned things up and streamlined it, while also giving the underpowered sides of the book a little bit more of oomph. I think that with the insane defensive abilities of the Stonehorn side of things, or the stone mountain cow aspect of Lumineth, kind of really getting up there, you could argue that they should be in tier 1. My only thoughts are they've just been nerfed a whole bunch, especially Sentinels, and so it's a shaky tier 1. Let's just put it that way. Now we have Auric War Clans. This is a very diverse book, and some have argued in the comments that it should be broken up into Bone Splitters, Big Wa, Cruel Boys, and Iron Jaws, just because they all play very differently. I'm choosing not to do that just for the sake of brevity, as well as all of the different rules can interact in specific ways. It just makes things a lot more complicated to split it up, because then I could argue the same for a lot of other armies. Anyway, Orc War Clans, they are tier 1 almost exclusively off the back of Iron Jaws and Big Wa. I think Big Wa is the best because you pretty much get access to all of the good things of each of the separate books without much of a downside. So they are solidly tier 1. And Seraphon. Big magic space dinosaurs and a very ancient angry toad. There's not much to say about Seraphon. Nothing's really changed. They still vomit out mortal wounds in the hero phase, and they have big dinosaurs to back it up. Moving on to Magakin of Nurgle. This is one that I considered moving down into tier 2 with the recent pretty hefty points nerfs, which I think were warranted based off of the cheap durability that they were able to put out, but I think they're just barely sticking on to tier 1. They have really fat durability, probably one of the most durable armies in the game, which they should be. But something to keep in mind is that they have been nerfed a few times, and so they're not going to be as powerful as the previous tier 1 rating. Stormcast Eternals. This book is still really good, even though dragons have been nerfed again and again and again. It's still a fantastic book. The problem with Stormcast is because you have so many options to pick from, that you are definitely going to have a huge disparity between lists on the optimized lists versus the non-optimized lists. So it's going to be kind of who's playing the Stormcast and are they bringing dragons, pretty much. Now the elephant in the room, Beasts of Chaos. This one was totally misplaced by me in my last tier list. If you were unaware, in my last tier list, I put them in tier 4, I believe, or tier 3. But I was just being conservative and not really thinking too hard about the insanity that Beasts of Chaos have gotten up to since their White Dwarf update. It has been correctly shown and told to me that Beasts of Chaos are one of the best armies in the game right now, just because of the absurd amount of rend that they can get up to, and just kind of throwing units at you. A super powerful book. We'll see what the rumors of a new coda, or excuse me, a new battle tome does to the beasts. Lastly, we have the Slaves to Darkness. Their new book is currently available in the Army box, which I think it's the first Army box of its kind for Sigmar. I know that there is a whole bunch of Army release boxes for 40k, but at least in recent times, I think this is the first one for Sigmar. If I am wrong and there has been Army boxes in the past, let me know, but the Slaves to Darkness new book is incredibly powerful. I think this might give Beasts and a few other of the tier 1s a run for their money for being the best army in the game. The streamlining of the Slaves to Darkness book and the just kind of making things a lot easier and a lot simpler while buffing a lot of units is going to make Slaves a real nasty opponent to fight. Kind of on a side note, if you are wondering why there's no Legions of the First Prince on this tier list anymore, Legions of the First Prince, as far as I'm aware, has been subsumed into the Slaves to Darkness book as a underwhelming sub-faction, which I personally am kind of upset about. It's getting rid of one of the armies that I collected and that I loved the playstyle of just all Chaos Demons, but it looks like that is no more, unfortunately. The new Slaves to Darkness, Legions of the First Prince, is underwhelming and very disheartening. But regardless, Slaves to Darkness, their new book, seems very powerful. And that was my end of year review for the Army tier lists. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment, and if you'd like to see more of this type of content in the future, please consider subscribing. I try to upload once a week, generally on Sundays, but sometimes that just doesn't happen because I'm in school and I'm doing a pretty hard career path, or excuse me, a degree path, so sometimes I just don't have the energy for it. Regardless, thank you for watching.